Morning, everybody. Those of you who have already joined, I'm sure some more will join as my typical experience is. First of all, Mohan, thank you for joining in. We've hit you on a Saturday, and we've hit you right at your lunchtime, which is a little early for us because it's 11 o'clock here. Uh, so welcome all of you all to this second fireside chat that we are having. The first, as you know, was with a banker, Asim Dhruv. And the second one, I had committed to having one on credit information. And honestly, I couldn't think of a better person to kick this series off than Mohan. Mohan is an ex-banker. He worked with one of India's largest private sector banks and started his career in the credit information space almost simultaneously as I did. So as I started being the first MD of the first credit bureau in India, he was the designated officer to be the coordinator and etc. In addition to his other roles from that bank, from the private sector bank. And then he moved on, of course, to Experian India, and now he is Experian for Asia Pacific, based out of Singapore. So Mohan, thanks a lot. Welcome. And the way we'll do it is I will ask you a few questions. Please feel free to answer or say you don't want to answer or whatever you want to do. And then we will take any questions that the team, that the listeners have. They will send them out and my team will send them to me and I will kind of present them to you towards the end of this session.
Thanks, Satish. Pleasure to be here. Look forward to the question session. Thank you.
So as we've said, it's yesterday, today, and tomorrow. So let me take the time machine back for a while and then flip back. And tell us a bit about your experience in the credit information industry and how you personally have seen it evolve in the last 15 years in this part of the world.
It's a great question, and I think these last few years have been hugely formative for this industry. If you look at what's happened in this period, specific, let's say, to the Indian context, we've actually moved from the theme of negative data, which is only default data that was getting shared by the banks between themselves, to positive data. Which is all information about credit getting shared among all the banks. What we then saw is the introduction of multiple bureaus. So essentially, the introduction of competition in some form, which gave shape to a lot more of product capabilities that started entering the market in the theme of value-added products and the theme of scoring and so on. 2017 was a bit of an inflection year when in India, for example, we saw the whole point of data parity come through among the bureaus when RBI came back and indicated that all banks need to submit data to all the bureaus. And then subsequently, India has been leading, I would say, this industry perhaps, from the front by a margin, just given the stack initiatives that we have at this point in time. Again, contextually, when I talk about the India stack, I mean, it's not possible to talk about it without mentioning, for example, the UIDAI initiative, things that have come together to sort of add value to consumer identity and in some sense strengthen and support things that are happening in the bureau. And going forward onto things like GST and beyond, open data in some sense, that I think is changing the very nature and fabric of credit information that's available. So if you look at these last 8 or 10 years, a little in perspective, we've moved from an evolution from negative to positive data to competition and a vibrant market to data parity. To a place where we have multiple data sets. We're now talking about a public credit registry, which is coming up as well. So it's been a sort of a tremendous period of change, with perhaps the one thing that is changed, stayed constant through this period, which is a whole theme of information getting used for consumers and for consumer credit in some form, which has actually evolved during this time, I would say, fairly exponentially.
Okay. All right, that's interesting because my next question is jumping forward into the future. And what, according to you, are the biggest challenges that the credit bureau industry will face in the next 5 to 10 years?
I think that key challenges are going to come in from consumer consented open data and data privacy. I mean, if you look at the way GDPR is shaping up globally, the way we are seeing, for example, data definitions undergoing a change globally, bureaus will have to look at the best way they'll evolve into that new world. And that evolution will have to come in the form of their being able to work with the consumers on areas like consumer data privacy to make sure that the flip side of this, which is data privacy of the information that they are holding, will be in perspective. I also think rather than just thinking about this as a challenge, there's a huge area of opportunity here. I mean, if you take a step back and think about this, for example, in the APAC context, one of the things that we pointed out is that population base is something like about 4.2 billion odd people. Roughly about 30 billion people, 30% of this population, about close to about 1.6, 1.7 billion people are credit penetrated in the sense they have access to formal credit. Leaves the opportunity in a very big way for financial inclusion to be relevant. And as open data as a phenomena takes over this industry, I believe there's a lot that can be done to work with the financial system through the bureaus in aiding financial inclusion. So I almost think, the way I talk about the whole situation will be to say that while the challenge is likely to come in from the open data and from consumer data privacy, I believe what it also helps us get to is this whole situation of addressing the opportunity of financial inclusion, which I think is one of the defining problems of our era. I mean, if you just look at everything that's progressed through the ages, and if you look at credit penetration in comparison, especially in this region, while we are starting to get into banking for the population, we aren't as much doing enough for the availability of credit to that population. So I think with this coming era, we have the ability to impact that problem. And I actually think that's the biggest banking challenge perhaps in the coming period. And as a derivative industry, I can't think of not calling that out as also an equally large challenge for the bureau industry, and equally an opportunity to create social as well as economic impact.
So, it's very interesting. You kind of, in a nice way, preempted my next question, which is that, given the thin file concept, which is that people don't have credit data, and more importantly, how do you look at the financial inclusion in a country? And you're sitting across a region where each country has evolved to different levels. And as you rightly said, although India is leading the way just now, but ironically, and I don't know how many people know this, that most people don't know, is that the bureau industry in India was probably the last of the block in the entire SAARC region. We had bureaus in Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, Pakistan, even Nepal, till India came around in about 2005. So how does the bureau industry tackle the issue of financial inclusion, or what kind of data and information can come in which will enable that balance 70% that you talked about who don't have access to formal sector get that?
I think this will come in multiple forms. Let's actually take specific examples. Let's talk about India. I mean, India is not in a very dissimilar situation from the way I sort of described Asia Pacific. The credit penetration in the country is in the sort of 30% ranges. The number of consumers that are getting reported to the bureau is about a third of the overall population base. Alternate data or open data, I talked about as something that will have an impact. And I believe that the biggest area of impact that will come from this space will be in aiding credit decisions and supporting financial inclusion for the no-hit / the thin file population. Now, how will this happen and what kind of data is useful? I'm sure we'll talk about alternate data, which is a big part of the conversation around credit data in any case. But if we take a step back, the thing that's happening in India as it's happening in Southeast Asia and the whole region is this whole theme of uh, alternate data coming to the fore. This is coming in multiple forms. So, for example, telecom penetration in this part of the world is almost in its 97-98% ranges, despite the fact that credit inclusion is perhaps in the 30% ranges. The other thing that's happening is we are seeing a huge increase in penetration of pure digital products like digital wallets, for example, online retailing, like super apps, for example, ride hailing and delivery kind of apps that are in play. Now, all of these are helping us get information about consumers. And there is a way in which we believe orchestrating this information, putting them together in an alternate data format can actually give us information about consumers. So, for example, Experian as an organization is working in countries like Indonesia to put out alternate data scores, which are based on telecom data. We're starting to do that in India. And the way this works is to work with the telcos, work with the right consent structures with consumers, but to get to the place where we can use this information to derive almost an equivalent score, a credit score equivalent coming from this alternate data. Now, the advantage with this is the fact that there will be a huge complementarity of information that we'll have with a credit included versus a non-credit included population. We could just, for example, work on the TID file or the no-hit population and take this alternate data, score them, and find a means of reaching a credit product to them, which we think is a very viable way of ensuring financial inclusion is addressed effectively. It was, I must say, a point of a pleasant shock and a moment of absolute epiphany when I, a couple of years back, saw the first results of our alternate data scores. I've always been, born and bred in the banking system, and always thought of banking data as the primary data that we can use for predicting consumer credit, goods and bads. The first time, and I think this was about 7 or 8 years back, when we actually put a credit score together that used alternate data to predict goods and bads using alternate data. And we found, to our surprise, the fact that these models started giving results that were as good, if not better, than the core credit data that came from the banking system. It was a huge moment of epiphany for me, because that meant that you could actually work now with this data to address a big part of the population that hadn't been reached by credit products already. So to your question, I think the way to access this is by putting out credit products that can use alternate data coming in from telecom data, from alternate data for, through credit wallets, payment wallets that consumers are building, through online retailing, through other data sources like super apps. I think there are certain country models where we are also seeing utility information starting to be important. So if we put all of these models together, work with the right construct of consent from consumers, and put it together in a model where we think we can take it out to the market as a no-hit product, that is the solution that you are referring to, which can complement the sort of base banking product that the bureaus are currently sitting on, but at the same time expand into addressing this challenge that I talked about earlier, which is of financial inclusion.
Okay, so let me flip this. I think there are 2 or 3 issues that have always constrained the growth of the bureau industry. One is this whole issue of privacy. People are obsessed with privacy, much as I personally believe that if you're sharing data with a registered credit bureau, the privacy issue is becoming more a talking point rather than an actual point of discussion. The second problem is that, we've been talking in India, for example, alternate data since the bureau started. I've been, remember meeting IRDA and TRAI and everybody, but obviously there is a absolute inertia in moving that forward. And what has happened now is that it's become like, it's been 15 years, 20 years since the bureau industry in India started, and we have not taken any step further in getting alternate data into the system. The third biggest issue, according to me, is the example, if I can give you, is of a hungry man who's put in front of a buffet. He doesn't know where to start eating. So we know this, while Experian has done fantastic work in the analytics space and so are the others, the question today is, are Indian banks and Indian lenders equipped to understand bureaus and use them as efficiently as the products that these bureaus are offering deserve? For example, even today, 750 is a good score in India. Now, finally I'm noticing, and I'm very glad to notice that State Bank and HDFC and all have started saying, if your score is above 750, you will get 5 paise off on the loan, which is the beginning of a differential pricing based on risk and reward, and something that I personally have been passionate about. And we've talked about this from ever. But how do you tell a banker who's only ticking off his score, that he's taken a score, so that there is no regulatory issue and with this thing, that the amount of data and the way in which you can use the data is absolutely enormous? And how do you train? I think the challenge is training bankers who don't understand risk and all in that manner. Sorry, long question, but I just want to bundle 2 or 3 questions together.
And maybe let me try and address this in a certain sequence. I mean, you talked about data privacy. Maybe worth talking about data privacy and concerns around data privacy. I think the unique opportunity that we are getting in Asia Pacific is to evolve our data privacy regulation in parallel to open data initiatives that are rolling out. I mean, in many other parts of the world, we've seen data outreaches grow, and then privacy regulation have to catch up. Whereas I think we have the unique opportunity here of being able to do both of these together. And I think we should use that opportunity well. I do think that there is a consumer role in this whole part of alternate data and data getting used, which I believe will have to come together. And the best way to do that, obviously, is by building on the regulation that many of the countries in this region are already talking about. So data privacy regulation happening in parallel, and open data being looked at in the perspective and through the lens of privacy as well is going to be important. I don't think it's to do one at the cost of the other now. Having said that, data privacy is not a broad brush, and there are different layers and different ways in which data privacy need to be looked at. I mean, so if you look at the Western world, which has got a 90% plus credit penetration, versus the Asia Pacific region, which is still in that sort of 30% credit penetration, data privacy cannot mean the same thing. And we have to have regulation like India is evolving, for example, on the open data stack, where this information is available for the purpose of decisioning and for financial inclusion. All that we need to do is to keep inside the fact that we have to look at privacy regulation having a bearing into some of these conversations as well. A big part of consumer data privacy is around consumer education. Most consumers today don't know what they are giving up when they are being asked for information or when they are giving consent. And I think a big part of that evolution will have to be to also let them grow into understanding what that consent structure means and be able to educate them. And I think the bureau industry, as much as the banking industry, will have to work in trying to solve for this. So that's one broad answer on the data privacy side. Let me pick up the second question on the data availability and how the banks are addressing this. In sequence, I think firstly, as an industry, we needed to get to the place where we understand alternate data and walk beyond the hype cycle. We've talked about, for example, the hype cycle in the past, Satish, where we've said that this whole theme of going through that peak of inflated expectation, the value of gloom, to the plateau of productivity that we talk about in the hype cycle context. Alternate data has gone through most of these phases, and the faster we can get to that plateau of productivity, the better off we are. We need to know what data is usable, how it is usable, and to your point on the banquet for the fasting, sort of problems of plenty. The way to address it will be by players like the bureaus stepping in to figure out what information is of what value, and making sure that we are measuring that, making sure that that's having a part in the conversation. For example, all data or alternate data is not equal in the context of being able to credit differentiate. We find that certain amount of information, certain kind of data classes have higher information value in their ability to predict credit outcomes than others. Also, while I make this statement, I'm conscious of the fact that this is a bit of a developing situation, in the sense this is not a point in time data as much as it's an evolving piece of information. And these models change and evolve over a period of time as the country goes through its own evolution. So, the second answer broadly is this problem of plenty on the data side will have to be solved with a clear prioritization view on which data to go after, what sequence to go after. And that might be defined by the problem. It might not be a uniform broad brush solution that we'll have to go with. We'll have to take a view, for example, in an Indonesia, this data stack might be different from a Vietnam to an India, where it might be different. So each of these will have slightly different overlays. The third part to your question on industry absorption is an interesting question. And I think the way I think about this is, banks have an unenviable role. I mean, we are both ex-bankers, so we understand the challenge that industry comes from. The fact that their challenge is making sure they find the balance between doing what is right for credit and credit evaluation, while at the same time making sure that they are not taking undue risk. So they have a natural mechanism of having to manage the risk. I think the way I'm seeing this play out in the market is, as usual, we are seeing the sort of early adopters get into the theme of looking at picking up some of these models, using them, for instance, in underwriting of credit lines. That's happening for, say, newer products of unsecured credit and buy now, pay later, etc. That's helping set up the initial credit lines, which can then be used for higher levels of credit. So the introduction products are starting to get put out by the non-banks, by the fintech industries, some banks in participation. And I think the bigger banks are sort of waiting and watching to look at the outcomes of this, running graded experiments before they scale it into larger level production models. But slowly and but surely, I'm seeing this shift happen. I mean, from a place, for example, where we were not using any of this data for decisioning, in multiple markets across this region, in Vietnam, in Indonesia, in India, we are starting to see this alternate data starting to have a play in setting up some of these credit limits. The way it usually starts is by looking at these data sources for fresh signals. Data stagnancy, for example, given moratorium kind of issues that we've had over the last 6 months, is a key problem for the banking system. And many of the institutions are looking at trying to get signals from these new data sources. What it's then evolving into is their use of, let's say, scores for small credit lines. These might be, a couple of thousand rupees, about $50-60, and then evolving onwards to take on higher credit lines that they can take this to.
Okay, Mohan, so I have one question on alternate data before we move on to the next subject. For example, in South America, British Columbia and all those countries, a lot of emphasis on alternate data, on trade data. I'm supplying material to you and you're paying me on time, not paying me on time. And that forms a significant component of the credit bureau industry there also. Of course, the issues of discipline, data quality, integrity, and all kick in as you talk. But is that a direction that countries in our region and India specifically could be looking at over the next few years? And the second question is that, okay, I think Mohan has been unmuted. So can somebody please unmute him right away? Rashika. Yeah, thanks. I don't know why you got unmuted. Yeah, so my question is, that do you see that as a possible alternate data? And I'll give you two examples. Australia, for example, as you know, started with negative data and huge challenges it had to get to positive data. Then I did the bureau in Bhutan, which is of course a very small country in terms of numbers, and it required one phone call from the finance ministry to the insurance companies and the cell phone companies, and the next day we got data. Now that's not going to happen in India, or any other complex country with regulatory frameworks and all. So this whole issue of alternate data and the ability of the lending institution to really use that data, is that something that we are flogging for too long? Is that a direction that will happen ultimately, or is something we should just give up on?
I think it's it's definitely happening as we speak, would be my argument, Satish. So let's actually look at what's happening in India. Trade data with GST coming in is actually very relevant information that's now available with consumer consent. So here is a great example where there is alternate data consent model that's actually giving you the ability to assess a small entity very logically with alternate credit models that can be used in decisioning. So it's happening in some sense. The great thing that's happening in India is it's coming together through this open stack that is evolving, and the whole conversation that the Indian government is having around this building of this open data stack over a period of time. The question of using, let's say, telecom information, of using utility information, I think that there is it's a time-bound question that will be answered, in the sense, I believe the problem and the challenge is so large and the opportunity is so large that eventually we'll get to the place where we'll solve for it. But to be fair, it's not a simple problem to solve. So for instance, if you take the telecom data, part of the challenge that we've seen within that system when we've had initial conversations with TRAI and with some of the telecom companies is just the volume of data that they're handling in the India context is really large. For them to be able to curate it and to be able to put this into a structure is going to be a huge expense, and they will have to figure out the right model to take it forward in. So that's one part of the problem. There are other logistics related problem in the fact that most of these, for instance, are in the India context, prepaid credit lines or prepaid connections, which have a very different model of operation compared to the postpaid connections. I mean, and it's likely, by the way, that most people who have a postpaid connection might already have access to credit. So maybe there is a non-trivial problem to be solved there. But if I look at the extent of the issues that are there, each of these represent a reasonable complexity of problem to be solved before we get to the place where we can start using this data. There are then commercial challenges, obviously. I mean, for example, as you're looking at data monetization of the telco data, the telcos will be concerned on the way that is getting used in a way that is giving them some level of benefit. And some of these are questions that need to be addressed as well. So the point I'll sort of make on this is, do I believe that this will happen? I believe a part of the answer is it's happening. It's happening in two or three forms. One, it's happening in large economies like India through evolved government exercises around the data stack. It's happening in smaller economies, maybe by way of, like you said, in Bhutan. Let's say the government's taking a quick call and trying to move with certain level of agility, which in a smaller structure is much more possible. In parallel, I think there are some large, hairy problems to solve, which we'll need to, as an industry, look at solving before we are able to curate and get this data in. We, for example, talked about this in the context of, let's say, utilities. Now, in utilities, there is a very fundamental problem in the fact that a utility is a sort of fundamental right. When you can't switch off a utility connection for a credit reason. So how do you use that information is a bit of a challenge. How do you differentiate between the premise that the utility is indexed on versus the person who's staying in that location? So there are some challenges to be solved there. which I think also merit a certain level of mention. I mean, the way I look at this is, I actually think the India model is a very, very example setting, forward looking model, which can be used by many of the geographies in this region very productively. I mean, what India has done in sort of digitizing the stack and looking at bringing and curating information in is a great way of the government participating in the process and making sure that they are taking a view on some of this information being available ahead of private interests, which is exactly the right model to solve what I believe is a really big problem on financial inclusion. In parallel, for private enterprises, I think they are sitting on a non-trivial set of issues commercially, as well as logistically, as well as physically to solve before they get to the place where they can make this data available. I mean, while it's we are impatient to get telco data in. The level of complexity associated with the telcos actually being able to put that data into the structure is not trivial and will need to get addressed. So we'll need to work through the process, so with some bit of devil in the details. I'm very positive, though, having seen the last few years, that this is a problem that will be solved, and we are in the process of solving with more evolved government, sort of attention that is coming into that space.
Okay, I have just one last question on this, and then we move to another topic, which is that I still believe the bureaus specifically and the central bank, and Reserve Bank in this case, has to do something in terms of educating the bankers, the lenders, and the individual consumers onto the value. People still look at bureaus as a way of catching the crooks. And I'm saying it's a way of getting the good guys so you can lend them on better terms and policies also. What is happening is that if you look at India, for example, you've got all the public sector banks stacked up. Then you've got the new foreign banks and the private sector banks, the HDFCs and the ICICIs of the world. And then you have NBFCs who are using the bureau purely to if I can say, cover themselves in case that something goes wrong, that we had taken a bureau score, it was 770, so it's fine. But as these new products and new concepts come in, I don't think the bureaus are doing enough in India. I don't know about the other part of the Asia, but I don't think the bureaus are doing enough in public awareness and in terms of banking and lending awareness as to how this thing actually helps them from a cost perspective, from a turnaround time perspective, everything.
And again, I mean, not to try and support the industry that I am from, Satish, if I can give as objective an answer as I can to this one, is there more to be done in consumer education and in educating, the banking system? Yes. Is there, more of a path that, for example, banks, regulators need to travel to be able to use alternate data? Yes. I will, though, make the point that, and I'm not trying to be, tactical when I'm or tactful when I'm saying this. I don't think the issue is that there is a lack of intent. I do think that large systems will tend to move at a little lower pace than we want. I mean, you and I as individuals and who have seen this industry will want a progress at a particular pace and rate, and we are very entitled to our impatience. But I think the industry itself is a complex, interplay of multiple things, and it will take certain time to come there. So let's talk about, again, specific issues here: alternate data and alternate data models. A big part of the problem is alternate data models will need to be regulator vetted before the banks are able to use them. As the regulator is starting to look at some of these models, they'll have to look at how stable these are. So there's a time period problem to be solved, because credit data, remember, is something that the regulators are used to, and they've seen cycles. We don't know, for example, how alternate data will perform through cycles. We are collecting that information as we see. For example, things perform through this pandemic and so on. And there are certain pieces of this that we cannot accelerate beyond time. Can we do more? Of course we can. We should. But do I believe that it's reasonable pace for the industry at this point in time? I believe it is. I mean, I do think that there's a big problem to be solved. It is very fair for us to be impatient. But again, as a large system, this is a sort of turning a ship. It will take a certain amount of a radius of turn for that to happen. It's not going to happen overnight.
Otherwise, you'll have the Suez Canal happen. Okay, moving on. There's a lot of talk, as you know, about OCEN, the Open Credit Enabling Network. And people are actually debating now whether the bureaus, as you and I understand them, will continue to exist in their form. Are they agile enough to change, or what will happen?
Yeah, so it's a fair question. I do think taking a step back, right? I mean, I don't want to talk as much about the bureaus as about the whole way I believe this is evolving. I believe the way the situation is evolving is OCEN kind of initiatives are usually positive, which is what I was pointing out to start with now. Again, let's go back to the point that you were making earlier, which is this is a complex problem to be solved. There are consumers to be bought into this process. There are banks to be bought into the process. There are regulators to be bought into the process. And all of this will require people who understand data to get in and play a role. Now, I don't know whether the bureaus will end up doing it. All of them will be agile enough to be able to do it. But we certainly think, I certainly believe very strongly individually that there's a role that a bureau-like entity needs to play in in bringing neutrality. I mean, here is a problem. This open data construct is nice to think through. But again, to your point, what data is useful for what is not something that is very apparent and visible. Somebody needs to curate it and put this information together in a form and manner. Somebody will need to then set standards. You pointed out, for instance, a 750. The reason why the 750 is talked about is it's a standard of a score that is now usable across the system and has value. If we let this be individually defined, this is like a credit rating system that everybody will go ahead and define their own views on, and I'm not sure that will work. So I do think that there's a role for somebody to play in trying to bring some of these constructs together. It might not be in the same way as bureaus worked in the past, whether it will be bureaus that will be able to do it, whether all of them will be agile enough to be able to move in. For example, within Experian, we view that we will have a very critical role to play there, and we are evolving ourselves into that space. Will all the bureaus want to do the same thing? Will they have the ability to invest and get there? I don't know. But do I believe that there is a role for a bureau equivalent to sort of bring that standardization capability there and to create an industry capability around how to facilitate that data information being is being made available? I do think yes, there is.
When we started the bureau industry, and you and I were both there from different angles, the whole issue was that bureaus would get compared to rating agencies. People would think, that, oh, you're the CRISIL of individuals and all that stuff. That is behind us now. Now, suddenly I'm seeing in India, this registry and the way it is evolving, it seems to be in conflict rather than in complementing the bureau industry as it happens in other parts of the world. So if you look at that, I've seen the report and I've seen newspaper editions where they're talking about the registry starting to give information not dissimilar from what the bureaus are doing. And I know that at one point the bureaus were a little concerned or threatened or whatever. Now, why is it that the bureau industry needs to be even now worried about a registry and rating agency, and now OCEN is coming in? And why is it that these 3 or 4 pillars cannot stand on their own and supplement each other's activities?
I believe that's exactly what should happen, and what I believe will happen over a period of time, Satish. I don't think but what I will find its level, right? I mean, these are complex individuals that are getting put into play. They will find their way to sort of interact with each other, and what I will find its level. I think the key thing is each of these initiatives taken in isolation, I believe makes sense. So I can't find a flaw in the way this is sort of evolving. If I look at each of these in isolation. However, to your point, is there a logic in this coming together and a role of complementarity being formed between these initiatives? Of course, there is, and I think it will happen. It's a matter of time before we get there. I mean, we have seen this play out in multiple, industry legs in the past, where one initiative is thought of being able to make all the changes. It won't. We'll have to have all the players come in, put in their energies in order to make things work. And I believe genuinely that that's exactly what will happen in the time to come.
If you were mandated, and I've seen a lot of Hindi movies, if you were made the RBI governor for 2 hours and only to concentrate on credit bureaus, what would you do?
I think, honestly, I don't think I would do too much in 2 hours that the RBI is already doing.
2 hours was just to put pressure on your timeline. But yeah, what would you do as a focused approach to the credit bureau industry to make it version 2.0?
I think the key thing for the industry is to look at accelerating things that can be done on the open data space, the alternate data space, and anything that can be done to sort of accelerate that is something that I will be positive on. Now, while I say that, I'm also conscious of the fact that I will have a very unidimensional view. I'm going in from the bureaus. Tomorrow, if I sit in a regulatory seat, I'm sure there'll have to be 10 different things that I'll have to balance out to figure out how they'll play one against the other in order to look at the outcome. So, I mean, maybe the core point that I'm making, Satish, is having seen this industry now for the last 10 years, I actually think we are sitting on a very, enlightened regulator driving these processes. So I don't think that the lack of pace that we might feel is because they are wanting to move at a slower pace. I think it's because there are complex problems to be solved that they need to solve over a period of time and get there. So I'm not of the view that if I go there, for example, things will change overnight. I'm sure I'll have a little more of a slant towards solving this problem. But that apart, I genuinely believe that what I'm seeing from the regulator, especially in the Indian context, and I must say across the region, is a genuine intent to try and solve what is a very complex problem with multiple levels of interplay. And I don't think it's going to be an overnight problem to solve. I do think they bring the right intent and the right direction. And time is a dimension that we'll have to be a little patient on.
Yeah, I'm just going to take a minute off to tell the participants, in case they have any questions, they should post them. And then, because in the next 5 minutes, as we wind down, Mohan will be happy to answer a few questions that we may have. Mohan, 2 questions. One is crystal ball into the next 5 years. What do you see?
I see, maybe at the cost of a little bit of repetition, open data playing a very vibrant role in the credit system. I see, us getting to the place where within the Asia Pacific scenario and perhaps globally, financial inclusion will be a problem that we will have made substantial progress. And I don't think we will have solved it by that time, but we will have addressed it to a great extent. I see consumers having evolved to understand their credit data a little better and consent structures a little better. I certainly believe that all 3 of these will improve very vastly in the next couple of years. Just given the context of the acceleration of digitization that's forced on us through the pandemic. I was having this interesting conversation a couple of days back with a few bankers in the region, and one of their points was that the pandemic has done more for digitization for this industry than multiple years of transformation has done. And it's a forced change because people have had to find new models of operation. And they've had to put in place these structures of remote operation, consumer outreach, and more importantly, adjust to the fact that basic consumer behavior is now changing to accommodate digital channels. If you put these pieces together, I think there's an urgency now more than ever on the need to move to digital, or the ability to move to digital. I think that will be a huge catalyst to everything that we've already had going on. So everything that I say, I believe very positively will play out in the next few years. Open data, I think consent structures, and a huge progress in financial inclusion that I believe will be a very, very fundamental construct of how I believe bureaus and data will play out, credit data will play out in the next few years.
So there are a couple of questions that have come in, but before that, my last and probably one of my passions, we talked about two of them. One we've already talked, which is about differential pricing and giving a risk reward thing to people with better scores and vice versa. The last one, which I kind of personally have been trying to champion but has not happened, and maybe this conversation will help, is the creation of an association of credit bureaus in the APAC South Asia region. I have prepared white papers, I've sent it to the World Bank, but it's not working out. And I don't know what your thought on that is, and whether anything that we can do as Athena to help support that.
I think it's a positive construct, Satish. I mean, we have, for example, industry associations like BIIA, which is
Yes.
a information industry association.
Yes, I know.
Is doing something reasonably similar, maybe with a little more of a slant towards business information. Is there a logic to some of this happening? Yes, I believe there is. I think there is a fundamental reason why this hasn't happened automatically. More we are looking at the way bureaus play out. There is a huge federated construct to the way bureaus are put together. I mean, the Indian regulation and the Indian construct is very different from the Vietnamese or the Indonesian construct. The level of commonality is very, very thin. So I think the reason why this hasn't already evolved is because, maybe it needed to come to the place of the level of sophistication where that common conversation will have a bearing. And I believe, again, we are starting to get to that point. I mean, things like alternate data will, I believe, have a larger bearing on the way they play out. And I think it will start, having a play.
Yeah, there's always a first step to be made, yeah.
Yeah, sorry?
There's always a first step to be taken.
There's always a first step to be taken. So maybe answering this as directly as I can, do I believe that there is a logic to it? Yes, I believe so. Maybe now more than ever. I think it hasn't happened historically because there was not too much of commonality, and there's a huge level of federated structure that's sort of implicit in the data industry. That's not very easy to transcend. So, but
so
we are certainly seeing some of those getting solved. Sorry.
We have two examples. One is, if you, I don't know if you're aware, but I'm sure you do. West Africa has a kind of common bureau across 5 countries, Senegal, Ivory Coast, and all those. And therefore, they have some kind of a association. And then, of course, there is an erstwhile USSR, which is, some countries have got together. So, for whatever it's worth, I'm going to send you that note I've written, and see what you think about it. And then we can see if there's something we can work on.
Of course.
Not putting you on the spot, but putting you on the spot.
Sure. No, I'm like I said, not to be on the spot at all. I'm very positive about an industry initiative that can bring us together. We've actually worked fairly closely with all the other bureaus in India, for instance, and we're doing that in other parts of the region as well. So very keen to do it. And if there's something that is
I will send you something. Yeah.
We'll be very happy to get that going.
Okay, great. A couple of questions that the listeners have been asking. So let me kind of ask you those questions. So there's one from Nikhil, who used to work with me earlier in HDFC also, that data is relevant only if it is intelligent for the user. From a non-institutional perspective, should bureaus also offer some sort of qualitative education to the non-institutional users on how to use the data that is being offered by them? Most SMEs would not be equipped or have the expertise to use the data offered by bureaus.
Yeah, so I think it's a very essential component of that consumer education challenge that I pointed out. And I think the education has to happen with the SMEs and small businesses before it has to happen for the consumers. The SMEs have a huge dearth of credit availability, and they need to be able to access information better. Now, there are two ways in which they'll benefit from the right level of information being available to them. One is they'll be able to present themselves better to the banks and financial institutions for access to credit. But there is also another aspect, which is they can use this information to decide and work on their supply chain and their sort of vendor list that they are working with. And I think that there is there is very little use that, for example, industry in general is making of this. So if you put it across these two areas, is this an area worth investing in? Hugely. I believe, for instance, that when I talk about consumer education, this is a key component of consumer education, and perhaps the first off the block.
Okay. Sorry. Couple of more questions. One is, a few players have started using psychometric for the new to credit customers. What's your view on usage of this tests versus alternate data scorecards? This is a listener called Nimish Shah who has asked that question.
And this is a very personal opinion. I'm not a very big believer in psychometric testing. I've used it, we've used it, and we've not found it very useful. There are multiple reasons for it. I think, the ability to sort of infer anything from a set of questions that you're asking someone implicitly is gameable and is something that can be cracked fairly quickly. I think the fact that, for example, vernacular language plays a big role in our country makes that more complex. We have, for the last 8-10 years, seen multiple players try and put psychometric models in place. I'm yet to see something succeed at scale. I mean, it's succeeded in small pockets, to be fair, but I'm not seeing anything succeed at scale. So I'm not a big believer, but that is not to say that it doesn't have merit. I always believe any idea is something that can prove itself out over a period of time. Maybe there is a certain level of evolution that it will come to, at which point in time it will be more useful. But I don't believe it's at that stage right now.
Okay. The last question I have, I think, is from a gentleman who knows both you and me, Srinivas Acharya from the Sundaram Group, very old friend of mine from my civil days, one of the biggest supporters, I should tell you that. And he says, do you think broader use of Aadhaar in the Indian context can help? Do the bureaus propose to do something about it, as the Supreme Court has struck its broader use?
So we are working with the Reserve Bank to look at what we can do to use this. What I believe is a critical piece of information. I think it's a unique data source for us, which is not very prevalent, for example, in other parts of the world. I mean, what we've done with Aadhaar is an amazing piece to the data stack that we've built. For us to use this as an identity instrument within the bureaus makes tremendous amount of sense. There are regulatory other challenges to walk through, but the central bank is looking at that, and we are working with them to try and figure out what we can do in this space. And a big hi to you, Mr. Acharya.
Yes, Mr. Acharya is a very old friend, as you know, also, and a big supporter of the bureau industry from day one. Another question that's come up, this has come from Fauzia. Fauzia is with the Swatantra Micro Housing Finance Company. In a largely cash economy with low credit penetration, how does alternate data tackle the problem of disguised consumption data points, where third-party vendors make utility and other transactions on behalf of consumers, thereby undermining the direct consumption data of a consumer?
I'm hoping I got all nuances of that question right. I think this whole cash economy problem is a genuine problem, and I think we are solving it in parts. So let's talk about the way in which this is getting solved as we go ahead. For example, digital wallets are starting to move more data into digital transfer models rather than into just physical cash. We've already seen that happen with the big shift that happened post demonetization and beyond. The GST is again a big piece of regulation that's actually helping us move in that direction with more organizations covered under the ambit and with more information available. I don't think there's going to be a sort of instant solution to non-available data or unstated income that we can go and impute very effectively. But if I look at the efficacy of some of these alternate data sources, given this progress that we've seen, I think they're substantially more predictive. So, I mean, to give you a sense of the scale of change, we are seeing, for instance, in multiple instances, score genies, which are basically the sort of predictive factors, with alternate data climb up to the late 30s and early 40s, which is actually a very good genie for a standalone scoring model. So it's already getting to the place where it's quite predictive, and we believe that it's the right place for it to be in. Is it a full solution to the problem? A genie of a credit model in a developed market may be close to the 70s. But we think that at the late 40s, it's enough of a differentiator in the markets that we are in to be relevant. It will still need some further discernation, but outside of that, it's still very relevant. So it's not a full solution, and it's a great question, but I think we are very, very progressed in solving that problem with multiple things that are happening in the economy that are helping us.
Thanks, Mohan. That was great. I think we've run out of questions also now in perfect timing. So once again, many, many thanks, Mohan, for your time and your insights. Enjoyed catching up with you after a long time, of course, but more importantly, discussing something which I know we are both passionate about. And hopefully we'll take some of our conversations ahead in some shape and form. And once again, many thanks. Sorry for holding you up for lunch, and please carry on. And
no
thank
problem.
you very much.
No problem.
Thank you very much. Thank you. And thank you all the participants, please.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.